After 10 years in high ticket sales and closing over $250 million during that period and training hundreds of reps, I'm here to tell you most sales training you see out there is complete bollocks. The permission-based questions or the overly consultative approach, or on the other hand, that always be closing mindset is ultimately what could be keeping you broke. I'm going to break down everything that I wish someone had just told me when I was starting off. Literally the frameworks that actually close deals, also the mistakes that kill deals, and the reason why most people in sales never break above 5K months. If you're serious about high ticket sales, grab a pen. This is 10 years knowledge condensed into 30 minutes. When I first started sales, I thought it was all about being this consultant, asking all of these questions and just being like an impartial consultant. Or on the other hand, I was also taught that I should be this version of Jordan Belfort or this weekend millionaire recruitment consultant hyped up on Adderall. But both of these approaches are completely wrong. On one side, this overly consultative manner basically just keeps you in like the business version of the friend zone, right? Where you're offering business advice and giving options and you occasionally mention your offer, and it's this softy approach. But then on the other hand, this like Jordan Belfort, always be closing, you're just going to trigger sales resistance and they're just going to see you as another salesperson who's got commission breath and just wants money off them. Neither of those approaches are correct. High ticket buyers don't want consultants on sales calls. They also don't want someone like hammering them over the line. They want someone who can guide them to making an informed decision and also helping them to overcome certain barriers along the way. Here's what I see on most sales calls. The closer will start with something like, tell me a bit about your business and what goals you have in mind or what challenges you're facing at the minute. And in most cases, what happens, the prospect just unloads for 45 minutes, rambles a load of nonsense that isn't applicable at all, and then the closer will come to this cookie cutter pitch and just say, okay, well, I think we can help. Here's some information. And guess what? At the end of the call, they'll say, can you send me that over? I need to think about it. And they'll probably get on the phone to another competitor. That's what I see most of the time. Basically, you've just spent 45 minutes interviewing someone and basically doing a job that an AI could probably do, instead of actually guiding them to a decision. A discovery is not just about gathering information, okay? It's about creating weight around them staying stuck and emotional urgency as to what happens if they continue staying stuck. Another really common thing that I see is a real problem within the authority that a salesperson has. They either show up to a sales call as an equal or even worse, lower than the prospect. How can you expect to guide someone to a decision if you're showing up as lower status than them? You need to show up as the expert. You've seen this problem, the problem that the prospect's facing 1,000 times, and you know a clear solution to help fix it. Guess what? When you show up to a sales call as an equal, the prospect is going to treat you like one. But if you show up as an authority figure, the prospect's going to allow you to guide them to a decision. So I want to have a look at a high-level overview of how I structure my sales calls, what I call the anti-sales method. This is what I train my reps in. So to begin with, when we're opening a call, let's ditch small talk altogether. I don't mind a quick, how you doing? But it's a bit more of like a rhetorical, how you doing? How you doing? Yeah, okay, good, move on. Not, where are you in the world? What time is it over there? How's the weather there? Did you have a good weekend? Get rid of that completely. That is not moving you closer to a sale. And guess what? It's positioning you as another salesperson who has lower authority, quite simply. Instead, of course, be polite. How you doing? Welcome to the call. I believe we sent you over some resources before. Did you get a chance to take a look at those? Let them respond, find out why the resources were helpful to them in particular. This is going to give you an idea of their intent. If they can't be asked watching them, are they a serious buyer? Or what did they find helpful about it? That's going to give you a clue as to why they're on the call. We're already moving forwards. And then we're going to be straight in and completely understand what the outcome for this particular prospect needs to look like. So we might want to ask a question like, what's the biggest reason you're looking to scale your business with paid ads right now? Or what's the biggest reason you're looking to put on 5 kilos of muscle with our mentoring program right now? The reason we structure it in this way, to begin with, we're establishing some context. And then we're going to go straight into results-based thinking. Ultimately, we are not another salesperson. We're cutting through all the nonsense and figuring out why they are really here. And that's going to act as the anchor through our entire call. The next section from the opening is ultimately our discovery process. Now, this video would be a couple of hours long if I were going to go into the full discovery process and the type of questioning. But the most important thing throughout your entire discovery is that you move below surface level. Now, what do I mean by surface level? If someone says, well, I just want to grow my business, or I just want to get in good shape, or I just want to earn more money, or I just want more freedom, most closers accept that as the reason why they're on the call, but ultimately it's not. That's not the real driver. So we need to use what I call my staircase method to get below the surface and start to fully understand what's the real motivation behind why they're on this call. But this doesn't just apply to desire, this also applies to pain and problems. If someone, when you are digging into the pain and understanding what issues they're facing right now, and they say something like, I don't like my job, or I'm not getting enough leads for my business, or my current social media isn't getting as much traction as I'd like, we also don't want to accept that because that's surface level as well. So we need to make sure we're always going below surface. And I use what I call the staircase method. So what is that? It's basically 4 levels of questioning, so you get more emotional depth to what a prospect's saying. The first level is what. So these are going to be questions that usually start with the word what. So if someone said, my social media is not working right now, we'd say, what specifically is not working? Or what do you mean by not working? It's very simple, but what-based questions are going to allow us to just get the specifics. It's really important we never make any assumptions, so we always ask what to begin with and sort of play a little bit dumb so we get more depth. Then the second level is usually why-based questions. The reason we ask why is because then we start to understand why that's important to them. So we can ask things like, why is that a problem for you right now? Why is that so important to you right now? Or why hasn't this changed already? When we use questions that start with why, we start to uncover the starting point of the personal reasons behind why someone is facing a particular problem or why they want a particular thing. Then level 3 is usually like how-based questions. So we use how because it can allow us to quantify things. When we put a number to things, they carry more weight. So if we're asking things like, how long have you wanted this for? Or how long has this been a problem for? Or how much is this costing you? Or how much have you lost so far? If we can put an actual number to it, all of a sudden, especially within high ticket, problems and desires start to have a material cost or value. And the final level is impact or emotion. And this is ultimately how that desire or that problem is affecting them personally, or what it would feel like for them when they have achieved that. This is what really moves the needle. So if someone hasn't getting enough leads for the business, it's been affecting the sales team, they've wanted to grow this business for a while, but it's been affecting them for 2 or 3 years and they've been losing 2K a month, and we ask, what's that been like for you personally? Well, it's been really concerning, it's been stressful, That is what is going to allow us to get that real emotional depth and impact. So if you use that staircase framework, when you're going through pain and desire and cost of inaction, you're going to get much more weight, and ultimately more weight carries through to more closes. Now, phase 3 on most of how I would present a normal sales call is to look at limiting beliefs. Using limiting beliefs honestly separates good closers that are earning 10, 15K a month to the great closers that are earning 25K, 40K a month, 50K, even 100K in some cases. Because often limiting beliefs are like objections in disguise. A limiting belief is ultimately the story that someone has told themselves as to why they aren't where they want to be. But as you probably know, if you're watching this, you're going to be someone who's interested in developing themselves. We aren't where we want to be in life down to us. Quite simply, it's usually fear that's holding them back, or lack of action, or procrastination, something along those lines that has meant the person hasn't got to where they want to go. So we can ask questions like, you seem like a smart guy. Why do you feel like it hasn't happened yet? And when I say it, I mean usually the desire. Whatever they've told you is a powerful driving desire. Why do you feel like it hasn't happened yet? Or why do you feel like you aren't where you want to be yet? Now, the trick here is some people will give you external limitations. So they'll say, oh, I've not got enough time, or I've not got enough money. Guess what? If they're using external factors, that's going to creep up as an objection later on, so be very careful of that. And we need to take those external limitations and get them to take internal responsibility for them. So if someone's using time as an excuse, ultimately we all have the same 24 hours in the day. Me, you, Elon Musk. What's been stopping you just putting to one side an hour a day or a couple of hours a week to move you closer to the goal that you want? So for example, if we get a time-based limiting belief and someone says, oh, I've just not had the time yet, then we need to address this head on. Because if they don't believe they've had the time up until now, often that's going to creep up as an objection later on. So we need to call it out and allow them to overcome that and take internal responsibility for not ultimately making the time, and allow them to see that them not making the time is what's ultimately held them back from where they want to go. And realistically, you've got to keep digging until the prospect actually admits that it's on them and they're ready to make a change. And the fourth phase of my sales calls, my anti-sales method, would be the consequence and the identity shift. So after gathering the limiting beliefs, we might say, if we continue to hold on to this limiting belief, have you given it any thought as to what things look like 3 or 4 years down the line? And allow them to actually feel that. Give them space to feel the cost of inaction. And then we might want to ask this version of you, the version of you that you want to become, who has achieved XYZ desire, how do they act differently than how you're acting right now? And what actions would this version of you take right now? This is called identity splitting, and there's a few different ways that we can do it, but ultimately we want to separate the identity of the prospect from who they are right now and ultimately who they want to be. Because if we sell someone on an identity of someone they can become, that's so much more powerful than looking at a desire that's based around numbers or going on more holidays or growing a business. If you can sell a solution that allows someone to step into a version of themselves that they've always thought they could be, believe me, that's got some real value. So now I'm going to give you my 3 top questions that you can just sprinkle into your next sales call that, for me, have closed so many deals. The first is, why is that so important to you right now? As I was saying earlier, most prospects will give you surface level answers, like, I want financial freedom. And if you say, why is that so important to you right now? You will cut through the noise and you'll get, well, my wife's having a baby and I want to be able to stay at home and also travel when the baby's born. Boom, we've got it. This is a really good question for just cutting through the bullshit and cutting through those surface level responses. And from asking that question, you understand the real motivation and you're on your way to selling to them what actually matters. Question 2 is what I like to call the 2 realities. This is when you split their identity. This is further on down the call once you've understood the desires and the pains. And you might say something like this. So John, you've got 2 potential realities here. The version of you that carries on doing what he's doing and stays stuck, or like the John 2.0, the version of you who lets go of his limitations and his fears and actually takes action, provides a sort of life that he's wanted to for his family and achieves XYZ desire. When we look at these 2 versions of you, how does that John version 2.0 act differently, do you think? And they're going to describe all the actions that the successful version takes. And guess what is not included in that? Taking time to think about it. It's usually along the lines of taking action, taking the first step, committing, letting go of fear. And there's a bonus question you can throw in here and say, and who ultimately controls these 2 outcomes? And they'll say, I do. And you've got them to admit that they need to take the first step, and ultimately the 2 futures are in their hands. And question 3 is the comfort challenge. Now, this is usually after we've gone through the discovery process with a prospect that has been delaying things for a little while. We might want to say something along the lines of, John, you've wanted this for 2 years and you haven't really taken any action. why not just kick it down the road for another 6, 12 months? This is really good because it calls them out on the pattern of behaviour that's kept them stuck up until now. And it's really interesting because watch how prospects will start defending the fact that they are going to take action right now. They are going to basically buy right now, instead of what most closers do is try and argue them to take action. The prospects are sort of telling themselves they're going to take action. So it allows people to close themselves on taking action right now. Okay, moving on to objections. Now, there's so many different ways we are told how to handle objections. There's the people out there on Instagram right now who have all these quick lines and word tracks and fancy things that they say to prospects. Then on the other hand, you have your typical salesperson who, when someone says, I want to think about it, they just go, is there anything particular you want to think about? We've been on the phone for a while right now. Is there anything you didn't understand? Okay, you want to follow up? Okay, when works for you? So there's multiple ways that you can handle objections, but a lot of it comes down to your intention and your detachment from the close completely. What you don't want to have is commission breath. You don't want the prospect to think that you are ultimately trying to get a sale from them. That's the worst thing. You need to be completely detached. And your aim during the objection process should be to essentially try to help them overcome any fear and help them to figure out the logistics so they can get what's best for them. If you come in with that mindset, instead of just trying to get a sale, number one, you won't need to memorize any fancy word tracks or anything. You can just come into this and think, okay, let me try and figure out what's actually holding this person back behind this bullshit filter that they're telling me, oh, I need to go think about it, I need to speak to my wife, my money's in crypto. All that bullshit that is basically just fear dressed up in disguise, or sometimes it might be a logistical issue. But if you come in with that way of just trying to help them figure it out and see if it's maybe some of these limiting beliefs or these patterns of behavior that are showing up again, maybe reminding them of it. If you come in with that frame and with that mindset, you're probably going to smash out the park way better than if you're just trying to memorize word tracks and that sort of thing. But I do have a framework that's easy to remember, and this will allow you to have a process, but allow your questioning to come more natural, and the prospect will feel as though you're actually genuinely trying to help them. And I call it the C.A.R.E framework, C.A.R.E. So C stands for clarify. Now, we need to clarify that the prospect actually believes that our solution is going to get them to where they want to go. And we also need to ask them why they believe that. This is going to reconfirm in their mind that they believe we can actually help them. Keep an eye out here. If they sound a bit uncertain or, we want to address that. Because if they don't see the value, you're fighting an uphill battle, and you might need to re-go over things, or if they're uncertain at all, we need to look at that. But let's say they say, yeah, I do. Then often, whatever objection they've given us is going to be a smokescreen. If they say, I need to think about it, speak to my partner, whatever, it's likely just going to be a bullshit filter that we need to pierce through. So that brings us on to the A section of the objection handling framework. And the A stands for ask and isolate. This is where we're going to ask questions, and these depend on whatever response the prospect has given us. But the questions we ask are allowing us to isolate what the actual objection is. Is it fear? Are they just genuinely scared about moving forward? Or is it logistical? An example of a logistical objection could be they literally don't have the money right now, but they're getting paid at the end of the week. So when we're asking these sort of questions during this section, we might want to say something like, is it a case that you do have the money right now, but you're just a bit uncertain? Or is it a case that you literally don't have the capital to invest right now and you're going to go away and figure out how? This would essentially split, and we'd figure out if they're uncertain, then it's fear, or if they don't have the money right now, it's logistical. But we need to ask the right questions so we can figure out basically what we're handling. If we don't know what we're handling yet, then we're not going to be able to do the next section correctly. The next section is reframing. To put it simply, reframing is allowing the prospect to see something from a different perspective. You might have to do a few different reframes, because if they're perceiving something as risky, you might need to show them basically what is more risky, staying where you are or investing this money and getting to where you want to go. Which one feels more risky to you? If someone has a lot of fear, they've had bad experiences, then the way that you reframe is going to be different each time. It's going to be different on the prospect, but ultimately you're allowing them to see the patterns of the behavior, the limitations, whatever crops up, and ultimately change their perspective from offering a slightly different opinion. And you can say quite clearly, do you mind if I offer a suggestion? Or do you mind if I challenge you on that? The reframe is all about just changing the prospect's way of thinking. But you can't do this effectively unless you isolate what kind of objection it is. Because if someone's got a logistical based, and let's say they're getting some money out the savings, but they really do want to go ahead with this, and you start going into fear, are you scared? You can actually push them away. And this is really important, because if someone's like, no, I'm definitely going ahead, I'm just waiting for the money next week, and you're like, what's really holding you back? Is it that you're nervous that this will work? But it's really important when we get to the reframe that we actually ask and isolate first, because if you handle a fear objection by asking for a deposit, which is how you might handle a logistical objection, you're going to push the prospect away. If you've got a logistical objection, but you start to deal with it in a way that you deal with a fear objection, then you're going to push them away. So the ask and isolate before the reframe is really important, because you need to pinpoint what it is that's holding them back before reframing. Now, once you've reframed successfully, that doesn't mean we're going to try and batter them over the line. Ultimately, you want them to make the decision. So just saying things as simply as, where do you want to go from here? And then once we've done that successfully, we move on to E, which E stands for empower with action. Ultimately, we don't want to bash someone over the head and get them to buy. We want them to feel like it's their decision and they came to this conclusion, because you're not going to get any chargebacks if people think they've made the decision as well. You're not going to be reversing the card. You're not going to get complaints. You're going to have a much higher satisfaction and people continuing with payment plans and all that sort of thing if people feel like they've made their own decision. And often they have made their own decision. It's not unethical. So we're saying empower because we want them to feel like they're the decision making here. So asking things as simple as, where do you want to go from here? Or are you ready to step into the version of you that you know you can become? Simple questions like this, where we're asking if they're ready, or where do they want to go from here? And having that confidence as a closer to give them a choice. Because if you've reframed successfully, hopefully that choice is going to be yes. Now I'm going to give you some advanced psychological triggers that this is not really for beginner salespeople. This is for people that have been in the game for a while and they want to continue leveling up. The first thing that you can master and that you should master is identity-based selling. Now, I know I mentioned it earlier, but ultimately people don't buy products or services. They buy who they will become once they have received the desired outcome that they're looking for. They're basically buying identity shifts. Now, you can do this through your discovery process by asking identity-based questions like I mentioned earlier in the video, but you can also use this in the pitch section. So instead of saying this program is for people who want to make more money, you could say this program is for serious entrepreneurs who want to reach a level of financial freedom and who are done playing in the small leagues and actually ready to back themselves. The second advanced technique that I would implement is learning how to do a takeaway properly. When someone's on the fence or someone is disinterested, the worst thing you can ever do is try to justify your service, your product, or chase them down. Look, this might not be for you. This is for people who want to achieve their desired outcome. This is for people who are ready to act, who are ready to show up, ready to commit. If that's not you right now and you want to stay where you are, then that's fine with me. I can't strong arm you to do that. And if you frame it like that, watch how quickly people pull back in, more than if you just try to justify and force them over the line. And finally, using social proof and storytelling to explain an outcome or to give people reassurance. For instance, if someone is facing a particular issue or they want a particular outcome, then try to remember someone who you've helped in the past and tell that story, but frame it in a way that applies to what the prospect is saying. So saying something like, I actually had a client, James, 2 months ago. He was in a pretty similar situation to you, not exact, but pretty similar. He was doing X, Y, and Z, and he wanted to achieve X, Y, and Z, similar like you. And he just messaged me last week saying that he'd achieved what they want to achieve and that he finally feels like he's hit the level that he wanted to. Sometimes that story transfer, rather than saying like a testimonial or go and see our Trustpilot, that actual story transfer really resonates with people. Now, finally, I want to look at some of the most common mistakes. These could be mistakes that you're making right now on a sales call that is ultimately killing your close rate. The first mistake is leading with logic, leading with features instead of how it actually benefits the prospect as an individual. Features and benefits do not close high ticket deals, emotion does. Don't just tell them what the program or the service includes. That's not going to move the needle. Tell them who they become once they've purchased it. Mistake number 2 is accepting surface level responses. Now, I know we've looked at surface level responses and how to deal with them, but if you're wanting to be a top 0.1% closer, you can never accept a surface level response again. If someone says, I just want to earn more money, don't go, great, our program can help with that. Say, but why is that so important to you right now? Always, always, always dig deeper. Mistake number 3 is pitching too early. Ultimately, your pitch should be 5 to 10 minutes at the most and always at the end of the call. You shouldn't mention anything to do with your product or service until you fully understood the buyer. Most closers hear pain and want to offer solutions, want to offer how they can help straight away. Please avoid doing that. Build the emotional weight first. Allow them to see the problem with staying stuck as where they are, and then your pitch, your solution will seem like the most obvious bridge to get from where they are right now to where they want to be. Mistake number 4 is being too damn polite. High ticket sales often requires you to challenge prospects around the limiting beliefs, to challenge them when it's very obvious that they are just repeating patterns that have held them back up until now, by saying things like, has that way of thinking gotten you to where you want to be? Or have you given it any thought as to what it's costing you if you continue just believing that? If you aren't comfortable calling people out, then you're not going to succeed at this level. Mistake number 5 is accepting maybe prospects too easily. You should really be treating I need to think about it as a no, unless it's handled properly. I really don't like this phrase, but I'm going to use it anyway. Buyers are liars. Often when people say I need to think about it, the chances of them ringing you back up and saying, hello, Mr. Closer, yeah, I want to go ahead, so slim, because you've lost all of that emotional momentum that you've built for an hour. So the chances of them closing after you've built all this emotional momentum are at their absolute highest at the end of that sales call. And every hour that passes, they're reducing massively. So how do you do that? You implement everything that we've discussed in this video. You have a solid discovery process, a solid objection handling process, and make sure that you've basically squeezed every last drop out of it. Instead of as soon as someone says, I need to think about it, you're just going, all right, no problem, when's good for a follow-up? You're gonna be losing out on 50, 60% of sales if you just do that. Look, high ticket sales is not about tricks and word tracks. It's about often just guiding people through like real transformative decisions. It's about understanding human psychology and behavior. Prospects, when they come onto these sort of sales calls, are wanting a change, and they're often just looking for someone to help facilitate that change and guide them through that process, and that ultimately should be you. If you want the complete system, whether you're a beginner or you're an experienced sales pro, you could have 10, 20 years, or you could have 0 years, I really don't care. I've just scratched the surface in this video, but if you want my complete system, my anti-sales method, you want help landing positions, then you can check the link below this video. There's a video on there to see if I can help, and you should be able to book a call with me in there. Or you can just drop me a DM on Instagram if you've got any questions. or if you have any questions around this video in particular, then drop them in the comments below and I'll answer them. On top of that, also, if you have any topics or suggestions of things that you'd like me to cover in the coming weeks, then also drop them in the comments below. Otherwise, if you could just take one or two things from this video and implement them in your next sales call, then I hope they serve you well. I'll see you on the next one. Ciao.